So, who's missing?
Oh, Angus.
Yes, empty of Angus. Now, emptiness is said to be not like this room is empty of Angus, because Angus exists somewhere else. Angus isn't existent. And emptiness, however, refers to the absence of something that doesn't exist at all. Difference of entity between subject and object, for instance, doesn't exist at all. And it's really amazing. Let's see. What is it called? Gakja Shejala Yurve Mega and Gakja Shejala Mebe Mega. Two types of non-affirming negatives. One in which the object negated exists is all it means. Shejala Yurva, right? Exists among objects of knowledge being, because they're semi mikba, it's a sheja and semi mikba tunji. And the other one, Dakcha Shejala Visibe Meka, that doesn't occur among objects of knowledge. So you see that classification of non-affirming negatives is very helpful. It has an impact. When you learn that emptiness is not a case of, or Yondrup is not a case of an emptiness of something that does exist, but rather it's an emptiness of something that never did nor will exist. It puts all the more force on it, and it puts force on the fact that we live in a world of difference of entity of subject and object. There's a real liberative punch to it. I won't say soteriological punch, but that's all right. This sort of removes you, the word removes you, doesn't it? Then, Jo-nang Dol-po-pa put forth a theory in which Yongdrup is, or at least this is what Gelugwa says, scholars say about him, his text, Ngedun Gyatso, Ocean of Definitive Meaning, exists. And I started reading it with David Need, but he didn't continue on it. Very, really fascinating text on the Buddha nature in Tibet. More like what people associate with East Asian Buddhism, but is completely there in Tibetan Buddhism. He set forth a view on the Buddha nature, or Yongdrup, as being a positive, a dhruva, not a gakwa. And it didn't appear to the root by way of negating an object of negation. You see, it could appear by a positive root. And indeed, when one reaches the path of seeing, you've already, well, it seems to me anyway, right? Since it's an uncommon feature of mind only and Madhyamaka that emptiness can be perceived directly. And emptiness is the absence of an object of negation, but in another way, you could say that the very fact that you can perceive it directly means that it's positive. Mm-hmm. That you might have to get at it, or you might help to get at it, through negating an object of negation. Otherwise, emptiness Yongdrup could be viewed as something that's separate from Shenhua, right? Now, what Jo-nang Dol-po-pa set forth was an emptiness that is empty of Gunda and Shenhua. So there's non-existent objects of negation, objects of negation, and existent objects of negation. But somehow he turns this around also at, I don't know if it makes a difference between emptiness and thoroughly established nature, you know? If he's going to get a positive out of it, a dhruva, then he can't be just talking about emptiness this way. Or yondru, make a difference between emptiness and a yondru. So, what is yondru? Kunda Tang and Wonki Tong. Now today I'll introduce the vocabulary of Dongbe Dongbani. Betsy Napper did some research into Dongba and Dongbani in Tibetan and in Sanskrit, and indeed they're used interchangeably. You wouldn't think they would be. What this is saying really is the emptiness which is Yongdrup's emptiness of imputational natures and other power natures. So the Dongshi, say it.
Dongshi.
Is Yondrup for him. Whereas for Tsongkhapa, the basis of emptiness, whereas for Tsongkhapa, in a Dongshi te karere, the gotcha for Tsongkhapa la, Tsongkhapa lu shir sha. That means with Tsongkhapa's system as a basis. Gotcha te karere. Sungsen says how they do truba tang. Good. Say it. Sungsen says how they do truba tang.
Sungsen says how they do truba tang.
And then Dongshi, so Megyu Gunda. Rabba, Gacha de Megyu Gunda yin. But a special Megyu Gunda, not just anyone. In the Dongshi?
Shiru. Oh, for the same time.
It's a good answer. You have to word it in terms, he said Shidru, anything that exists. And that's very good. But if you word it in terms of the three natures, remember you can posit a shenwang with respect to each phenomenon. I just gave you the answer. Shenwang. Dongshi, shenwang, gakcha, Megyu. So this is Tsongkhapa's answer. What is Sheriff Jensen's answer? What is the Dongshi of Dongbani? If we word Tsongkhapa's, what do we get? Shenwang. What? And go on and say Dongbani. What are you going to say? What is it empty of? If Shenwang is the Dongshi, what is it empty of? Huh? But how do you say that in terms of the three natures? Gunda, right. Gunda kitong. That's how you word Tsongkhapas. For Sherkyansen, it's Yondru, Gunda and Shenwang kitong be Dongbani. So then for him, what's the Dongshi? Wrong. Yondru. You can sort of see it. It, as a positive entity, is empty of what? Huh? Gunda tan Shenwang. So, I mean, if we make up this system right here, I mean, this part is not made up. It appears, at least according to Gelugpa scholarship, I'm yet to read the whole text. It's a marvelous text because it's all on the Buddha nature. And it gives you, you know, the source quotes for the opposite side, opposite to Tsongkhapa. We could say the Yondrup is a positive entity, and its emptiness, right, would be an affirming negative, mayinga. And its gakcha, you know, Yondrup's gakcha, Yondrup ki gakcha de, Yondrup ki gakcha de shejala misiba tang, shejala siba dere, niga, both, right? Things that don't exist among objects of knowledge, gunda, and things that do exist among objects of knowledge. So then emptiness becomes not a mega. Well, I mean, it's sorry. It could still be a mega, right? Because there are two types of mega. Gakcha shejala sibe mega tang. Gakcha shejala misibe mega. Did I say the same thing twice? No. But you see, what's implied by this emptiness is a positive entity. That's the Yondrup, I guess. So otherwise, I can't see how you get Yondrup as a positive entity. Drupa. Anyway. Drupa, they say that of him. I don't know if he says it himself. I don't know why not. Because it can appear to the mind without negating an object of negation. You know, like the clear light of death in Gelugpa Highest Yoga Tantra, for instance. They say there's a debate about whether emptiness appears or not to the mind in an ordinary person's, when the fundamental mind of clear light appears at death. Some people say yes, but it's not noticed. And other people say all that's appearing at that time is a dissolving of coarse appearances, not emptiness. And you can see why they want to say that, because if emptiness were to appear, it should be upon, I guess, I don't know, is that what they're saying? It should be upon the elimination of an object of negation. Is that what they're worried about? For it just to appear but not be noticed? Does emptiness appear to sense consciousnesses? I forget. Tsongkhapa says something in his medium exposition of the of special insight. Now, where was I going with this? I guess it was to point out the difference in these two systems. So Tsongkhapa says, hey, you're taking Yondrup as the Dongshi. The Dongshi should be those very things that, the Dongshi should be those very things that are misconceived by ordinary beings to be established as having a difference of entity of subject and object. It should be, the Dongshi is going to be viewed in a new way. And that's how wrong perceptions, wrong conceptions are counteracted. It's not by way of viewing Yondrup as Gunda and Shenwang that one gets drawn into cyclic existence, etc., and gets blocked off. That's Tsongkhapa's claim, that the Dongshi is being misposited. And now if you look at the Samkhya system, the liberation means that the Purusha, which is consciousness, something like the fundamental innate mind of clear light, that the Purusha, person, and which is the only thing that's consciousness, is separated from matter. And matter includes even things like intellect and the sense consciousnesses and all of that, plus these things. When we separate those two, we're liberated. In other words, it's like when you separate out the fundamental innate mind of clear light from the coarser levels of consciousness, then you got to get used to it, but you can be liberated. And a Buddha no longer devolves into these coarser levels of consciousness, but stays within the fundamental innate mind of clear light at all times. So for Samkhya, the confusion that brings one into suffering is to confuse pure consciousness with all of these other things. Now, pure the sense consciousnesses and all these things are being attributed as being conscious, whereas consciousness only exists with the person. Now, Shes-rab-rgyal-mtshan takes emptiness to be it's like Yondru, which is this positive entity, and for him it's also a yeshe, and some kind of exalted wisdom that is empty. You have to separate it from Gunda and Shenwang, even from existent things. And I don't know if he says it, but you would imagine that it's the confusion of Yondrup, of confusing Yondrup on the one hand with Gunda and Shenwang on the other, that draws one into suffering. Now, similarly, in Gelugpa Highest Yoga Tantra, the fundamental innate mind of clear light can be said to be empty of the coarser levels of mind. That's a kind of emptiness in which the object of negation does exist among objects of knowledge. You see, there are two types of emptiness even within Gelugpa. They rescue this back when they come to talk about the fundamental innate mind of clear light. But this is not inconsistent or contradictory with the absence of a difference of entity of the subject and object. It's built on that. So it's probably saying too much at one time. So I guess, Jeffrey. But it's not. So it could be. One way it looks crazy to say that the Dongshi is Yondru, because it's this stuff that we're misconceiving. So the Dongshi is this stuff. But in another way, the Dongshi could be Yondru, which we are confusing with this stuff. You could just turn around and look that way, right? We could say that there is basic consciousness which is being confused with this stuff. And some of it is turning into inert. You could say turning into inert matter and into so-called conscious, even really matter. And that matter will just disappear when you really understand consciousness. When you really understand consciousness. Now in Samkhya, what happens is that when you really understand the person or pure consciousness, then matter runs away. Where it goes to and so forth, so they don't bother. They say it's like Well, they use the male, of course. They said, well, I don't know, you wouldn't have to use the male, but they do, of course. And a husband sleeping with another woman, having sex with another woman, and the wife comes back, and the other woman runs away. Which, they have an unsatisfactory point in their system. Now, Calif says that when the fundamental mind of clear light manifests, all the coarser levels of consciousness cease. They don't, and the terminology of dissolve is used, dissolve into the fundamental mind of clear light, but they don't like that. Calif doesn't. They say the meaning of dissolve is cease. That's because they at least most Calif scholars don't want the fundamental mind of everything to be coming out of it somehow. But, they're really caught in a bind here. And for instance, in their tantric meditations, they will imagine a moon, for instance, into which everything dissolves. Dissolves. You pull it in and dissolve it. So the meditation says something that the philosophy is not saying. Well, the philosophy is denying, in fact, explicitly denying. And then also, you'll have a moon, and then a letter like free appearing, and then from that, light rays, and then from the tips of those light rays, Avalokiteshwaras, of a great number, going out and making offerings to Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, and sending down a rain of blessings that penetrate the minds and bodies and even the areas of beings and make them feel better and give you a better area and gradually help you in better and better and better ways. So you see, that syllable comes from the moon. So really everything's coming out of the moon, into the moon, out of the moon. So this big deal that they make about dissolve meaning cease is just that, a big deal. It says something about wanting to be different from Samkhya while doing the more or less same thing. Now, I say this kind of thing because I'm as I've said before, I think, historically at a point when, Tsongkhapa has delineated the various systems as different. And they've become now so different, right? The mishmash that he was seeing, he felt he had to correct into being separate. And the mishmash that he felt Sherab Gyaltsen was doing, and it really wasn't an eclectic system, a marvelously eclectic system. And you're saying, look, you're taken from here, you're taken from there. Really, you're neither this nor you're that. You fall outside of the great vehicle. You just don't make it. And, you could say, so what? This is a development that has its origins in India and was developed more in Tibet and prior to that in East Asia. It's another way of doing out Shakyamuni Buddha's teaching, or taking the sutras that were attributed to Shakyamuni, whatever, and doing something different with it. So that's how I look at it. You might find something that's, I always feel that you know, because of the Protestant emphasis on early Christianity, we have back in this permeating religious studies departments, because they're mainly Protestant, we have an overemphasis on the early system as if that's the best. And Aboriginal music is interesting and nice, but Beethoven is not to be neglected. Now, so that says something about Sherab-gyalmtshan. Sherab-gyalmtshan's just before Tsongkhapa and very popular and so forth. So Tsongkhapa attacks him some 9 times, I believe it is, in this Minor-Only Buddhism in Tibet translation. He doesn't ever say his name, but it's very clear who he's attacking. And then his student, Pedrupje, Tsongkhapa's student, attacks Sherab, uses that to order a good bit of the section of his compilation on emptiness, or a dose of emptiness, as Cabazon calls it, and I've called it myself, probably, or something. No, I guess I haven't. 1,000 dosages. It's very hard to know what it means. As an ordering principle. And you almost can miss it, that's what he's hammering, drawing from various parts of Lekshe Nyingbo on Samkhya, and hammering, putting them together in a different way from what Tsongkhapa did, as he says, and you read it, to like olives in the palm of the hand. You know, you can see them so clearly. Whereas Tsongkhapa's words are like Dorje Tsik, Vajra words in the Vajra vehicle, in Tantra, that have many levels of meaning and need to, you need to ferret out the meaning. And it's particularly the Jamyang Sheba tradition. Well, not the Jamyang Sheba tradition, the Kungru Chöjung tradition. Kungru Chöjung, who was Jaya Sheba's predecessor as author of the textbooks at Gomang. Kungru Chöjung, then Jaya Sheba, then Guntang, then Hakulotra Gyatso, then Jigme Tamsha Gyatso. Those 5, when you put them together, they have, they're really getting at Tsongkhapa's sources. Whereas, one of my teachers from another tradition said, why do they dig up all this stuff? Rinpoche already settled it, and why, it's like, why make a mess out of it? And, in one way, it's a very good point. Make a mess out of it, and you get totally lost. And so in one way, his tradition, Loseling, is more like graduate school, I guess. And the Kungru Chöjung, which has come to be called the Jaya Sheba tradition, but really it's the Kungru Chöjung tradition, with Jaya Sheba just taking huge hunks into his text and then refining some others, distilling some others. Kungru Chöjung, in fact, has a better word commentary than Jaya Sheba does, because Jaya Sheba does too much. It's like, that isn't needed. You don't need to spell out that, and because he already had it spelled out. And then he cleaned up some obvious errors. Sort of like the Yikcha, the textbook literature couldn't continue with these obvious errors, and it had to be straightened up. there's a saying within Gomang that Kunu Chögyong's textbooks are now all lost, and they were so vast and complete that if you read them and studied them, you would become omniscient. And of course, when you find one of the texts, as I did, which is sitting published at Gumbo Monastery, but well, actually, my teacher in Lhasa had it. Then you can see it's longer than Jo-nang Sheba's. There's another saying about Jo-nang Sheba's. Trumta is a book on systems of tenets. I don't know if you read it 4 times or 40 times. I think it's 40. Then you'll become omniscient. And Ling Rinpoche brought this up to me, and because we were talking about my study of Trumta Chama. And I said, well, at least you'd be very tired. If you read it 40 times and understood it, you'd know a hell of a lot. One of the Dalai Lama's favorite teachers, Gen Nima, who used the textbook literature of Losaling, even though he was really in his own college that didn't have any members except himself. He was the abbot of a college with no members but himself. So he used the textbooks of Panchen Suntrapa, Losaling. He was very familiar with Trumta Chemo and the Chendel, the annotations written by Belden Chögye, the Khalkha Mongolian. Because he's unbiased when it comes to Jo-nang Sheba and Panchen Suntrapa, which pisses off Goma a great deal. Useless. But it's very useful. And because Belden Chögye's text is, Jo-nang Sheba, despite how long it is written like a telegram, whereas his other books are not written like a telegram. And so you wonder, why is he citing this and so forth? Well, what are the issues here? Okay, so last time, or time before, whenever it was, we did the 5 types of non-dualism. And what about the 3 natures and the 2 truths? What are the 2 truths? Are ultimate truths, and let's call them conventional truths, or there are other ways of doing that. Ultimate truths within the 3 natures are what? Thoroughly established natures. Yes. So, are they equivalent? Whatever is an ultimate truth is a thoroughly established truth. Of thoroughly established nature was whatever is thoroughly established nature is an ultimate truth. Does it go both ways? Yes or no? Yeah. Well, you can more or less say yes. There are, of course, refinements of nature. But with regard to subtle emptiness, these 2 types of gakcha, emptiness of these 2 objects of negation, they're both ultimate truths and they're Yongdrup. And they're Yongdrup and Tentam Demba both. So Tentam Demba, roughly speaking, well, with this qualification that we're talking about, this subtle level, Tentam Demba Yina, Yongdru Yinbe Kyop, Yongdrup Yina, Tentam Demba Yinbe Kyop. So, what about so-called conventional truths? Do all conventional truths exist? What's divided into the 2 truths? What's the basis of division? Right. ye shi. So ye shi she jiao. Ye wa denpa ni. So that clears up everything, every one of these things, doesn't it? So now, then I'll ask you, in what sense are conventional truths is something that is a truth for the masses? I really dislike that term. Something that's true for the masses, a conventional truth. That's what you're saying. You know, permanent creator deity. And looked at from Buddhist point of view, doesn't exist, right? The masses in general hold a creator deity does exist if you took a vote on it, I guess. So, does whatever is a truth for the masses, or is whatever is truth for the masses, a conventional truth? Ye shi she jia. So you can't give up basic things. Have to say no, even if it makes difficulty for you. What is the difficulty you're having? Once you say that whatever's the truth for the masses is not necessarily a conventional truth, what's your problem with saying that?
Because all existence exists from their own side as the basis of designation.
Therefore, a creator deity
Created deity doesn't exist.
Therefore, what does conventional mean? Right? If it doesn't mean the masses, what does it mean? So in Gunzop Demba, Demba means a truth, something that exists the way it appears, right? Nansuda Nesul Tumba, for ignorance. Well, wouldn't that make all conventional, so-called conventional truths non-existent? Or wouldn't it, if some of them are, then wouldn't it make a creator, permanent creator deity, a conventional, or, yeah, conventional truth?
You're still qualifying with it. It still has to exist.
Right. So that's only an etymology of Gunzop Demba. That etymology is clearly given, both in mind only and in the middle way school, clearly. But somebody like Shantideva cites the meaning of the Father and Son Sutra, in which it is said, Shejatamje, Demanila Dude, they're included in the two truths. Benden Churche in another book makes the interesting remark. Why does Buddha say Shebachala? Says because these Turntam Demba and Gunzop Demba, and understanding the meaning of those is what is to be known. He could have said existence, ENTS, are divided in two truths. But rather than that, he said that which is to be known, using a word that's equivalent with existence, but has its own force. Anyway, you get that? We have an etymology. Whatever is a truth for jerks is not necessarily a conventional truth, a jerk truth. Right?
Right.
even though the etymology for jerk truth is truth for the jerky consciousness that conceals reality, right? That's the etymology. But etymologies can be broader than what they are including. So, where are Megyu-gunda included in the two truths? Horns of a rabbit, etc. Okay? What? They aren't. But Yuyu-gunda tang shenwang ni kunzo temper. Yondro ni tendon temper. So now, later on when you get to reading other people's writing on the relationship between the two truths and the three natures, watch what they do. They say, Thurman even says it, it's quite surprising, but this tradition is developed among
That word.
some worldwide scholars, some scholars worldwide, that with regard to the two truths, you've got Yondrup and Shenhua, you see? And Gunda is something that's added in between. It simply ain't true in Tsongkhapa system and in the system of all of his followers. Whether it's true about Indian Buddhism, you know, I've been so indoctrinated that, you know, I might automatically feel, well, how could that be? But I'm open to proof of the opposite. But I've seen it in two places, Thurman and maybe Nagao or somebody like that.
That Shenwang and Yongdrup refer to the two truths, and Kundak is just sort of placed in between them.
Yes. But it seems ridiculous because emptiness has to have an object of negation. It's not as if Madhyamikas don't talk about the object of negation. Two truths talk mainly comes out of Madhyamaka. It's not like, you know, like emptiness is just emptiness, as for Sharpkan's. Oh no, not even him. I mean, there's got to be a gotcha, right? Yondrup might be positive, but emptiness at least has a gotcha. And from what point of view do you say that Yondrup is positive? Probably because it can appear to the mind not through the route of eliminating an object of negation. In Gelug, I think when you get to the path of seeing, when they say through the route of eliminating an object of negation, is it through the past elimination of it? You know? I mean, you're not sitting there thinking, I mean, you're just passing in that session of, which is really non-discursive at that point, into direct perception due to the lessening and disappearance of the sense of duality. So it's not as if there's some further thought that's going to eliminate the object of negation, because look, even back at inference, one thoroughly eliminated the object of negation. We have to refurbish it, yes, in case you forget it. But it doesn't strike me that there's more elimination of the object of negation. But still, they want to emphasize that it's through that route. You can't do something like just concentrating on the mind and Yondrup appear. Whereas in other systems, it's hard, you know, it's hard to say that they really think that, just that. but like Mahamudra and so forth, maybe. In Nyingma, you have Gata Tekche, right? Where you're going through Madhyamaka reasonings and eliminating production from self, other, both, neither, things like that. And then you pass on to Hlundrup Turgal. Right? These can be reversed. But you've got to get the negative side in there, or it seems. Anyway, yes.
Earlier when we talked about the two truths, the Brangsen-rinpoche Chiragi Teniki Tuli-Tongpa, and the Sunzen Noade Taridu Tongpa.
I'm very happy that you're speaking in Tibetan. I really am.
How would the emptiness of imputational natures and other power natures be in relation to those two truths? Is it another truth, or is it just a summary of those two truths?
The emptiness of
Imputational natures.
Shenwang Gunda Kitongba Sede Yondrubre Tuntam Dembaere. A meaning young, right? Also. Shenwang Gunda Kitongba De Yondrup Tang Tuntam Dembare. But nothing in between. So, have we talked at all about how other powered natures are natureless in two ways?
Yeah.
You were reading about it for today, right? This was the first time you touched it.
The negative
Is that right?
and positive was mentioned.
No.
It's not being the ultimate.
Of not being the ultimate. So Tuntamba Ngonyimeba is taken two ways. Natureless in terms of the ultimate. And so Shenwang are natureless in terms of the ultimate. I think we just talked about it briefly. Shenwang, Tuntamba Ngonyimeba Meba Re. Kayin Sena, Shenwang De, Tuntamba Maimecher. Right? Shenwang, Tuntamba Maimecher. Then that same compound, Tuntamba Ngonyimeba, is taken differently with Yondrup, right? Yondrup, Tuntamba Ngonyimeba Yinde, Tuntamba Yanyin, Ngonyimeba Yanyin Becher, because it is those two things. Whereas in the other interpretation of the compound, you see Buddha, so-called Buddha, plays with Tuntamba Ngonyimeba in these two ways. It's all part of the Indian culture, the aesthetic of playing with words and doing things in different ways. So you got Shenwang being Tuntamba Ngonyimeba, and you get Yondrup being Tuntamba Ngonyimeba. And of course, if you screwed up the meaning on this, you would think that Shenwang really are the ultimate. You see? If you didn't understand that they are called Tuntamba Ngonyimeba because they aren't the ultimate. They don't have the Ngonyi of Tuntamba. So that instead of Tuntamba Yanyin, Ngonyimeba Yanyin, which is true of Yondrup, this is Tuntambe Ngonyi, something like that, a genitive tatparusha. Don't have the entityness, don't have the nature of the ultimate, the nature which is the ultimate. Okay? I don't know if in a genitive tatparusha you can say which is the ultimate, but it's a good time to be bringing this up. We're exhausting my knowledge of tatparushas. And the other one's a dvandva, right? Two Tuntamba is one. It's like tying two things together. Cow horse. Okay? Cow horse. Into a compound. This is a cow horse farm. What the person means is, this is a cow and horse farm. They're not saying, this is a horse farm, this is a farm of horses which are cows, right? Whereas when you talk about Shenwang being Tuntamangonyi Meba, you're saying these are things that lack Meba, the nature Ngonyi of the ultimate. Of meaning that nature which is lack being that nature which is the ultimate. Now in another way, they do have the ultimate, right? Yongdrup is with them. They are the Tongshi of Yongdrup. So you can't say it's that they lack, you really can't say lack being, lack having, or lack the ultimate, right? They have the ultimate. They lack being the nature of the ultimate. And that has a real power. Why did Buddha say it? You see, this is part of the aesthetic, that it's not only using the word in a different way, which is cute, but it has tremendous force in that these are the very things that we are seeing to be the ultimate. Now, does that fit into, in some way, into Sherp-Jensen's view? Seeing the ultimate as being these things, or seeing these things as being the ultimate, doesn't make too much difference. But Tsongpa's worried about the misconception of these things as different in entity, right? So actually, if you take the two together, Sherp-Jensen and Tsongpa, they have it brings a richness to this field. It's like two sides of a coin, you know, in some way. But I mean, there are two sides that are fighting each other in another way. And, you know, one can object, well, Jeffrey, if that really is the meaning, why didn't somebody point that out? Oh, well, I could say, well, it's to sharpen the mind and to cause us to try to penetrate the similarities. So we'll have a new eclecticism. I will put forth a new eclectic school that sees a harmony between a harmony on a profound level between these systems that so strongly oppose each other, without, in the least, losing sight of their respective differences. And with that, as a close, for next time, would you read Mind Only Buddhism in Tibet 40 to 51? And 176 to 206. And if you have time, and there are references to issues in absorption in the external world, every now and then look over and be bored by it, or not bored by it, but just notice, oh, that's what it's doing, you see? And it goes on for 5 pages on this. Just get an idea a few times. Thank you.